Welcome to episode 32 of Traveling Science. G'day legends, welcome back to season 2 of Traveling Science, the podcast that's sharing science with the world. After a few months of traveling around the globe, I'm back in my home of Lorne, Australia. And if we haven't met before, I'm Crowe, the traveling scientist. I'm a health science communicator, and on this podcast, we interview doctors, researchers, and experts, hearing their stories and sharing their ideas that can help us to live smarter, happier, and healthier lives. Today, we're kicking off the new season solo with a deep dive into a topic that affects millions of lives around the world: addiction. And addiction isn't just about drugs and alcohol. You could be addicted to playing video games, shopping, or even just addicted to using your phone without even realizing it. So today we're going to be breaking down the science of addiction. And throughout this episode, I'm going to be answering questions like, what actually qualifies as an addiction? What causes those addictions? How can you treat addiction? How can you help a friend with their addiction? What are the symptoms of addiction? And what are the most common addictions? And we're also going to discuss things like drug-addicted rats, dopamine pathways, medical detoxification, aka drugs to treat drug addiction, neuroadaptation, tolerance, dependence, rehabilitation, relapses, cognitive behavioral therapy, and cold turkeys. But before we get started, feel free to give me a 5-star rating on your podcast app of choice. And leave a comment if you can, because it gets more people listening so that I can help more people to improve their lives, which is why I make this show. It's not for money. In fact, I don't make any money by recording this. I just do it for you guys. So if you want to pay me back in some small way, a positive review or a simple share of this podcast would really help me out. And I appreciate you for doing that. Now, addiction. What do I mean by addiction? Well, people say that I'm addicted to drinking tea, and I say that I can quit any time that I want. And I'm going to, right after this last cup. Other people might be addicted to weightlifting or listening to country music, but there's nothing wrong with those addictions. Well, except for the country music thing. It's a bit weird. But when we're talking about being addicted to something, it can be anything that you keep doing despite knowing that it causes harm. Just think about that for a moment. Is there something that you have a habit of doing regularly that causes problems for you over time? It could be causing some health issues, or maybe it's something that costs you a lot of money, or maybe it's impacting your life in some other subtle ways, like damaging your relationships or your job. Well, whether you or somebody that you care about has an addiction, today I want to share some information that could really help you out. And I want to start with an interesting story about a famous research study called Rat Park. Long ago, way back in the 1970s, there was a scientist who went by the name of Bruce Alexander. Bruce was undergoing some experiments to look at drug addiction in rats. And when he put a single rat into an empty cage with nothing except for 2 water bottles, one with pure water and one with drug-laced water, he found that the rat would repeatedly drink from the drugged water until it overdosed and died. Sorry. But then he did a similar experiment. This time he put a rat into a large cage with ramps, wheels, and, importantly, other rats. This second cage was called Rat Park, and it was much more stimulating than the first cage. And Rat Park also had 2 water bottles, one containing pure water and one containing drug-laced water. But in Rat Park, when there was so much stuff to do, well, the rats barely touched that drugged water. You see, when a rat is able to play games and socialize with the other rats, it doesn't need drugs. Within Rat Park, no rats ever overdosed on drugs because they were in a good environment. And Rat Park really shows us that our environment is super important. When we are isolated or bored, addiction thrives. But when we're connected and stimulated, addiction fades. Now you might say, shut up, Jesse, rats aren't humans. But when it comes to addiction, humans and rats are quite similar. When we feel trapped or alone, when life is a bit of a struggle, we can easily fall into bad habits like drugs, gambling, or some other addictions. It distracts us and helps us to cope with life. However, if we're in a good environment, having fun and being part of a community, we're less likely to succumb to addiction and more likely to live a happy and healthy life. Now, obviously, there are a lot of complicated factors that play into one's environment. Things like poverty, unemployment, education, and a lack of social support. And in the grand scheme of things, addressing these issues is critical to preventing and treating addiction at a societal scale. But today, we're just talking about addiction on the level of the individual. Now, getting into the biology of addiction, I recently read a great book called Dopamine Nation by Dr. Anna Lembke. And it discusses why people can become easily addicted to bad habits in our modern society, how to prevent it from happening, and how to treat an existing addiction. And there's a quote in that book which reads something like this: "It is a paradox that hedonism, the pursuit of pleasure for its own sake, leads to anhedonia, which is the inability to enjoy pleasure of any kind." Basically, if you keep doing something repeatedly because it makes you feel good, this can lead to long-term problems. Neuroadaptation is when your brain changes in response to your actions, and with things like drugs or smartphones, it can lead to serious addiction. Your body believes that it cannot live without the thing, and you will start to have cravings, which might appear to others as crankiness, moodiness, and anxiety. Furthermore, over time, as we consume the thing that we're addicted to, we find that it doesn't feel as good as it used to. We become more tolerant of our addictions. And as a result, we require more for the feeling of less. See, tolerance is when your brain adjusts for the regular presence of an addiction. Tolerance also diminishes the effect, which means more is required to achieve the same temporary positive experience. It's kind of like when you start adding more and more hot sauce to your food, just so you can feel something. And hot sauce addiction is real, people. Do you know what that stuff does to your stomach lining? Anyway, tolerance is when your brain gets more used to an addiction, and dependence is when your brain and body actually have adapted to the presence of that addiction. So partaking in the addiction actually becomes necessary just for your brain to function normally. Imagine becoming dependent on hot sauce for every single meal. Sorry, I'm getting off hot sauce now. Addictions also alter the release of dopamine in a brain region called the nucleus accumbens. This area is part of the brain's reward pathway, and it's sensitive to experiences that give us pleasure, and it drives us to repeatedly seek them out. This reward pathway is essential for everyday motivation, like getting out of bed, exercising, or recording this podcast. But addictions can also exploit this survival system, as exemplified in Rat Park by the rats that took so much drug that it actually killed them. And if you want to learn more about tolerance, dependence, and the dopamine pathway, definitely check out that book, Dopamine Nation, by Dr. Anna Lembke. And I've also made a podcast episode all about the science of dopamine. Feel free to cue that episode up after this one. Now, unfortunately, addictions aren't always simple. And now that we've looked at some of the research that helps us to understand the key principles of addiction, let's move on to look at some of the common types of addiction and the underlying causes of those addictions, and the various methods that we can use to treat different types of addiction. So I briefly mentioned before, but let's define what an addiction actually is. An addiction is something that feels good in the short term and causes negative consequences in the long term, but you keep doing it anyway. And some people argue that addiction is a choice, while others see it as a disease of the brain. And the truth is, it's probably somewhere in the middle. Addiction can change your brain in negative ways, but behavioral changes can also reshape your brain in positive ways. The most common addictions include substances like smoking, alcohol, weed, and opioids, but also behaviors like gambling, overeating, gaming, porn, and social media. A few other less common addictions include things like shopping, tanning, exercising, caffeine, sex, working, and plastic surgery. And I wonder if you can relate to any of these. Like, does your caffeine intake impact your sleep schedule? Are your shopping habits costing you far too much money? Or do you get lost doom scrolling on your phone multiple times a day? If you do any of these things a little bit too much, you might be addicted without even realizing it. But what's the problem, Jesse? What's so bad about treating yourself every now and then? Well, addiction has various symptoms, and they can be damaging to your body and your mind. For example, cravings. A hint that you might have an addiction is when you crave something. You want it, like you really want it. And the desire is strong and it's almost always there. Cravings are like those annoying text messages you receive saying, "You up?" at like 3 a.m. They're persistent, distracting, and probably not good for you. And these cravings can be distracting to your normal life. You're trying to do your job or spend some time with your family, and your brain just keeps craving that thing. It can be so frustrating. Another symptom of addiction is simply the loss of control. You want to resist those cravings, but if they're really strong, it's easy to just give up. You know you shouldn't, but screw it. You just go for it anyway. And a big symptom of addiction is the health issues that come with them. Most addictions are bad for you in some way. If it's smoking, drinking, food, or drugs, these can be really damaging to your body. And if it's an activity like getting stuck into gambling, video games, or social media, it's likely to distract you from taking care of yourself, not to mention the people around you. Another symptom of addiction can be relationship troubles. Depending on how strong the addiction is, it's not uncommon to prioritize the addiction over friends, family, and even your partner. And this can be really damaging to your social life. Also, most addictions usually cost something, so loss of money is a really common symptom. Sometimes it can take up large portions of your money. I mean, think about what you could do with all that money if it wasn't wasted on an addiction. Finally, work and study issues are super common. Addictions will usually interfere with your job or your studies to some extent, causing you to fail at your work, your school, or your university. If you're craving something and can't control yourself, certain addictions can lead to health problems, social dilemmas, and money issues. So you can imagine how a seemingly harmless addiction can actually ruin somebody's life. Addiction is a vicious cycle, and I want to help you and the people that you love break the cycle. But before we figure out how to treat these addictions, we need to figure out something else. What causes addiction? Why do we get hooked on seemingly harmless things, which can have such a negative impact on our lives? Well, there are a few different factors which can promote addiction. One thing that can lead to addiction is stress. And quite often, people are stressed without even realizing it. Whether it's your job, your family, your friends, or your environment, many things can promote the production of our stress hormone cortisol. And when we're stressed out and those cortisol levels are really high, how do we deal with that stress? Well, smoking, drinking, drugs, and all those other addictions that I just told you about, they work by distracting us from our stressful lives. And they replace that cortisol, your stress hormone, with dopamine, the reward hormone. And you might do it just in small amounts, but some people can't control themselves. So that's how everyday stress can lead to addiction. And I've already made a podcast all about mastering your cortisol levels. So if you feel like stress is something you might struggle with, definitely cue that episode up after this one. Because in that episode, I discussed some healthier ways of reducing stress levels without resorting to your addictions. Things like mindfulness, meditation, yoga, exercise, eating healthy, even just taking a break from work, or even taking a few deep breaths. These are just some of the ways you can naturally lower your cortisol levels and reduce overall stress. Another one of the leading causes of addiction is trauma. And what is trauma? Well, it's essentially an emotional response to a seriously distressing event. Maybe someone was involved in a crime or witnessed a natural disaster. Maybe they were the victim of abuse or something worse. Whatever the experience, it can leave people feeling sad, scared, and helpless. And as a result, people who have had a traumatic past are more likely to suffer from an addiction. Your memories can be haunting and distracting, but certain activities, like those that lead to addiction, can help you to relax and forget about your past, and they give you a certain feeling of control in life. But the truth is that you're not in control of your addiction. It controls you and only makes things worse over time. I should also point out here that people in marginalized communities, such as Indigenous peoples, LGBTQIA+ groups, and people with mental health conditions often face a higher rates of addiction due to things like trauma and discrimination. Now, if you feel like you've been traumatized in the past, and let's be honest, most of us have some sort of traumatic memories, there's an excellent book that I would highly recommend. It's called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. He's a renowned psychiatrist who has dedicated his life to studying and treating trauma in children and adults. And the book talks about how trauma arises, how it manifests in the body, and various methods of dealing with and overcoming trauma. So that's just a little tip for anybody who might struggle with trauma. Definitely check out the book, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Now, another factor that could determine your susceptibility to addiction is your genetics. Stress and trauma are both environmental factors, but your genetics can also impact addiction. For example, certain genes can increase your risk of nicotine addiction by making certain receptors in your body more sensitive to nicotine, so withdrawal from nicotine is more challenging. Other genes can slow the breakdown of alcohol, leading to unpleasant side effects that make people less interested in drinking. So you can see that there are many ways that your genetics can alter your susceptibility to certain addictions. And unfortunately, you don't have a lot of control over your genes. Well, at least not yet. But it can be useful information. Look at your immediate family, parents and siblings. Do any of them struggle with addiction? Because their level of addiction may be directly correlated with your own addictive behaviors. So in summary, if you struggle with addiction, maybe it's because you have a stressful life. Maybe it's because you have a traumatic past. Or maybe it's because you're genetically predisposed to have addictive tendencies. But knowing the underlying causes of an addiction can help you to deal with it moving forward. And now that we've talked about the causes and symptoms of having an addiction, we're going to be looking at what you can do to treat your own addiction and help the people that you know who might also struggle with addiction. By taking control of an addiction, we can regain control of our own lives and start to live smarter, happier, and healthier. So, without further ado, here are 6 ways that people can treat addiction. Cold turkey, medical detox, cognitive behavioral therapy, motivational interviewing, group therapy, and rehabilitation. And the first treatment that we're going to be talking about today is called cold turkey. This is where you just stop doing whatever it is that you're addicted to. And cold turkey can work for some addictions like smoking or gambling, for example, but for serious drug addictions, cold turkey does not work. In fact, it can be deadly. I'm serious. If your brain and your body have become dependent on a substance, then suddenly taking that substance away can cause serious withdrawals that can possibly kill you. Obviously, this is only in extreme situations, but it does happen. So if you're struggling with a severe drug problem, going straight up cold turkey is probably not the answer. But if your addiction is something like vaping or shopping, going cold turkey can be a simple way to get over it. And with a determined mindset, you should be able to overcome the cravings. Dr. Anna Lembke, the author of Dopamine Nation, that book I mentioned earlier, she suggested when you feel an urge to do something, like a craving, try listening to your body and figuring out exactly what's happening inside you. Practice putting up with the discomfort of those urges and try facing your emotions and dealing with them head on, rather than tuning out, searching for a distraction, or giving into that craving. This will help you to grow stronger in your resolve. Also, use the people around you. Try telling friends, family, and workmates about the addiction you're battling with and ask them to help you. Their support will be critical to your success when going cold turkey. And for the record, if you've ever wondered why it's called cold turkey, it's because when people are suffering from withdrawal, their skin becomes pale and covered in goosebumps, which apparently resembles the skin of a cold turkey. I don't know. I've never examined a cold turkey, let alone cooked one. It's not really something we often eat here in Australia. Anyway, like I said, cold turkey won't fix every type of addiction. And if you have a strong physical or psychological dependence on a drug, then you might need to use what's called medical detoxification. This involves taking a specific medicine from a doctor based on your addiction. And the medicine will help to reduce symptoms of the withdrawal, helping to wean you off the drug that you were dependent on. For example, methadone is used to treat opioid addiction. But know that you cannot medically detox yourself. Medically detoxing from a drug of dependence must be done with a licensed professional. Talk to a doctor and they will help you down this path. And obviously, this is not going to work for things like gambling, social media, or porn. Unfortunately, we don't have medicine for these kinds of addictions. At least, not yet. Now, another treatment that can really help with addiction is called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, which you can do by seeing a therapist. It's based on the idea that addiction stems from an unhealthy thought pattern or behavior pattern occurring inside your brain. And CBT is a method of helping you recognize those negative thoughts and behaviors and replacing them with more positive actions. CBT is proven to be effective at helping people with addiction, anxiety, and depression. It's even helped me personally in the past. So definitely consider seeing a therapist and organizing some CBT sessions if you're ever finding yourself in a negative headspace. I've made a video all about CBT and you can check that out on the Traveling Scientist YouTube channel. Now, if somebody who you really care about is struggling with an addiction and you want to help them, this next technique is for you. It's called motivational interviewing, and it's been proven to help others to start taking positive steps. It's essentially a conversation where you ask the person about their motivations and their needs and listen with empathy and understanding. Don't tell them what's wrong or what they need to do. Nobody likes that person who says, "Have you tried just not being addicted?" That's not helpful. Ask them questions that help them to realize and make their own decisions. This is critical. It's so easy to judge others, to correct them, and to try and solve their problems. But in a motivational interview, you're not trying to fix them. You're helping them to help themselves, simply by being there for them. Give them positive affirmations, offer them support, and empower them to start taking action. It sounds a bit complicated, but basically you're just asking them probing questions and not judging their responses, just listening, showing compassion and support in hopes that this will motivate them to work on their addiction. All right, another method of treating addiction is good old-fashioned group therapy, which involves regularly joining a group of people going through similar struggles, usually led by a counsellor. The group has discussions about addiction, with each member sharing their personal thoughts and stories. And this is a great way to connect with other people and remind yourself that you are not alone. In group therapy, you can be vulnerable, you can help other people as well as yourself, and you can find the strength to beat your addiction. I know this sounds cringy, but it really does help. There's something about the accountability of being part of a group. You don't want to let yourself down, but you don't want to let the group down either. So if this sounds like it could work for you, do some research and try to find a group therapy meetup in your local area. The last treatment that I'd like to talk about today is rehabilitation, also known as rehab. And there are rehab centers all over the world to treat all sorts of addictions. And these places provide a structured environment and support for individuals in order to help them abstain, find the underlying causes of, and ultimately recover from their addictions. And they do this by implementing all of the strategies that I've previously discussed. They force you to go cold turkey. You can't give in to your addiction while you're doing rehab. They can offer medical detoxification if it's required. They have CBT sessions to help you rewire your thought patterns and behaviors. They offer motivational interviews to help people learn more about themselves. They do group therapy sessions to share stories and build relationships. And they do all of this and more in a safe space. It's kind of like an all-inclusive resort, except instead of unlimited cocktails, you get unlimited therapy, right? But it's this kind of setting that allows people to change the ways they think and act, which can lead to a smarter, happier, and healthier future free of addiction. However, the big issue with rehab is the price. To have access to all of these wonderful services costs a decent amount of money. However, if spending some money and time on rehab can help with your addiction, then it's probably a small price to pay, and it will probably save you a lot of money in the long term. Not to mention your health, your time, your relationships, basically your whole life. Now, it's important to note that recovery from addiction can and probably should involve a combination of all of these techniques, not just one. Maybe you'll try going cold turkey, but cognitive behavioral therapy could also help you a lot. Maybe you need medical detoxification, but group therapy could help you from falling back into the addiction. Maybe you'll use motivational interviewing to help a friend, but maybe they need to consider getting rehabilitation. Addiction is a chronic illness, and quitting is often a long-term process that may require a thorough treatment plan that's going to address the underlying causes of addiction, develop new associations with experiences previously linked to drug use, and create a safe and supportive environment. That means staying away from whatever it is that you were previously addicted to. Throw away the cigarettes, pour out the alcohol, delete the social media apps, pack away your gaming console, and actively make efforts to avoid any people or places that might convince you to go back to your addiction in the future. Relapse is a real issue that people who are addicted often struggle with. This is when you've gotten rid of your addiction and you're back to living a normal life, and then suddenly, without realizing, you've fallen straight back into your addiction. It is natural to want to have that feeling again, to want that dopamine release. But if you really want to overcome an addiction, you need to stay strong. You need to stay vigilant. Don't give in to those cravings. Don't go backwards on your journey. And I know that it's incredibly difficult and exhausting to perpetually resist those urges. But I also know that it's the best thing that you can do for yourself and for the people around you. Avoid situations where you might be tempted to give into your addiction. And have friends and family that can help you in times of desperation. Recovery isn't just about stopping an addiction, it's about building a meaningful life, forming supportive relationships, and finding purpose beyond substances or behaviors. Addiction affects a lot of people around the world, and it ruins lives. And it usually doesn't just affect the individual, it affects their friends, their family, and all of the people around them. Ultimately, addiction is powerful, but so are you. If you're ready to make a change, take the first step today. Talk to somebody, seek professional help, and be proud that you are doing the right thing for yourself and for the people around you. Together, we can beat addiction and build smarter, happier, and healthier lives. So there you have it, legends. That was episode 32 of Traveling Science, all about addiction. I hope that you got something out of this and that it can help you or somebody that you care about. Make sure you're subscribed for more Traveling Science every single week, and follow Traveling Science on Instagram to see what next week's topic is all about. And there you can also send in listener questions. Finally, if you're more visually oriented, feel free to check out the Traveling Scientist YouTube channel. And if you stick around to the end of the episode, I always leave you with a little secret. And this week's secret is that if I'm addicted to anything, it might be traveling. As the Traveling Scientist, I do explore the world a lot. And it does cost a lot of time and money. And every time I get home, I just feel that urge to go traveling again. Do I need to quit this addiction? On one hand, it costs a lot of money and takes a lot of my time, but it does offer me a lot of incredible experiences, and I have plenty of stories I could tell. But I'll save those for another episode, and I'll keep working on that addiction. Thanks for listening today, legends. I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.